Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is a slightly different one that we're doing today because today it's going to be just a solo live stream and it's going to be a Q&A live stream. So it's any questions that you've got about anything to do with Game of Thrones. I was thinking that for the last few live streams, I try and get to as many of the different questions as I possibly can that are there in the chat, but quite often there's some that I don't get to. So I thought this time what I'd do was, rather than having on a guest that takes up quite a lot of time with the to and fro, I love having guests on, and I'll definitely go back to having guests again from next week, but I thought I'd just take a week to focus in on the questions that you may have across anything. And I've got a whole load of good questions already come in from my patrons. As always, I will prioritize my patrons' questions. If there's any super chats, obviously I will come to them as soon as possible, but I'm going to try and rattle through as many different questions as I can. So I hope that's okay. That's certainly the plan that I've got for today. I should apologize for the slightly moody lighting here as well. One of my light bulbs went just before I went on air, so I haven't had a chance to fix that. But in terms of where we start, I was going to go straight away to questions from my patrons, and one from Cherim Miller. Hi there. Good. Well, I was going to say good to see you, but I haven't spotted whether you're in the chat yet. But the question is, why would Lyanna not tell anyone she wasn't kidnapped? This is, I think, building on my series of videos that I've been doing, looking at what I think happened in Robert's Rebellion, Tyrion at Harrenhal, and things like that. So the question is, why wouldn't she tell anyone that she wasn't kidnapped? I know we don't have a confirmed answer, but what are the possibilities? I've heard she was scared of Robert Baratheon, but did she think her brother would allow him to hurt her? Then there's the possibility that her father and brother's deaths were traumatic and she chose to remain silent while her two brothers were in danger. Okay, so my take on this is that we have to start by thinking about what communication was like back in that period. It's really quite hard to get up-to-date information about what's happening where and things like that. So I believe that when Lyanna and Rhaegar went off, they will have been blissfully unaware of the fact that very soon afterwards, Brandon charged down the King's Road towards King's Landing, demanding Rhaegar come out and fight. So I think that they will have been completely unaware of that. They probably will have been completely unaware, because it actually happened quite quickly, of the fact that Brandon then got arrested, and then Rickard Stark was summoned, and the two of them were killed. So it may well be that all of that happened before she even knew. When she did find out, she's then left with the question of who does she tell? So realistically, she's only got two options at that point, because Brandon's dead and Rickard's dead. She either tells Ned, which would mean sending a raven over to the Eyrie, where Robert Baratheon is, or she tells Benjen, who she's closest to, who's all the way up at Winterfell. So my guess is that if she did tell anyone, and there's probably a fair chance that she did, it was only after she found out that bad stuff had happened, and she probably told Benjen rather than Ned directly. So that's my take on it. It's not that she was watching all this stuff going on and just not telling anyone. I think that there was just a lack of communication going on there, because that was what happened in medieval kind of times. So I hope that one makes some sense. I'm just having a quick flick through there to see if there are any immediate questions. Okay, I'll keep on going. Guys, if you have got any questions, please do drop them into the chat. I'll go with a few more from my patrons. Nick Oswald, hi Nick, asks, what are my thoughts on the significance of the crypts? This is Winterfell crypts. How will George use them? to convey Jon's parentage, or in the kind of Kings of Dunharrow, which is a Lord of the Rings kind of allusion. So I did do a video on this quite a while ago that I called something like The Horn of Winter and the Crypts of Winterfell. So that was my take on what the role of the Crypts of Winterfell are in the story, because it's very clear, I think, that George R.R. Martin has set up the crypts to have quite a big role. Now, the thing that is there is that whenever anybody goes down there, there's this sense that the dead Starks are still there in some form. Their souls are still there in some way. So I think that there is a very clear feeling that they have a role to play, not just it as a place. I think that, yes, that there will be some hints in there, as the show has done. There will be some hints about Jon's parentage in there, but I think that the main role is for the Stark dead to be brought back. I think that this is I won't go into all of my theory in that video, but I think this is part of the reason why we have got generation after generation after generation after generation of Starks dead and buried underneath Winterfell. I think they are waiting to be brought back. We've already got so many undead of some different kinds in the books. I think that this is just going to be another one of those. So I think there will be something akin to the Dead Men of Dunharrow. Quick question. So Robert Johnson says, question, while it's different from your own theory, how would you go about defending a Stark incest parentage leading to Jon's birth? I don't think I would defend it. To be honest, I don't think that that's what happened. And I don't think that that's a thing that George R.R. Martin... I mean, he presents things rather than sort of defends things. He allows the reader to come up with their own views about stuff. So I don't think George R.R. Martin, when things like that appear, I don't think he's there moralizing about it. He's allowing us to view it and make a decision. So I don't think I would defend it. Do you think, this is Robert Uren, or Uren, do you think Euron will ambush Jon and Dany while at sea and capture Jon and Tyrion? Will Tyrion lose his tongue? This, I'm going to assume, is show question in terms of whether Euron's going to ambush Jon and Dany while at sea, because in the show, obviously, we left them on a boat. I don't think so. I think that they are going to arrive up north. I think they will come into White Harbour and go from White Harbour up to Winterfell as they planned. I think Euron is going to be doing what he said he was going to be doing, which is heading over and collecting the Golden Company for Cersei. I think that is what's going to happen. I think that the sea battles, such as they are, that we will see with him, are actually going to be to do with Theon and the Greyjoy plotline going on there. Will Tyrion lose his tongue? This is I think not in the show. In the books, there are quite a few hints that perhaps this might happen. I would refer people to an excellent video by Alt-Shift-X from a while ago when he goes through a lot of the foreshadowing for this idea. I've not done a specific video on that myself. I think it works. I think the bit that works best for me is that lots of people say to him, you better watch, people don't cut your tongue out, because that's what he's about. He's about quick words and the quick wit. And the Lannisters, the three Lannisters, or Jaime lost the thing that was what he defined himself with, which was his fighting hand. So he lost that, and so he had to reassess who he was, having lost his fighting hand. Cersei, in the books, it doesn't come across so much on the show, but in the books very much struggles with the idea that she's losing her beauty as she sees it as she gets older, and so she has to reassess who she is in the light of that. If the same kind of thing is going to happen to Tyrion, then yes, that would indeed be his tongue. Do I think it will happen? I think it's possible, certainly in the books. I really hope not, because I really like Tyrion and I really like what he says. That's the best part of his character. So I hope not, but it's entirely possible. Andy Bennett, or Burnett, says, I would like to know your thoughts on Sir Barristan and what will happen to him in the Winds of Winter. Well, we know a little bit about what will happen to Sir Barristan in the Winds of Winter, which is that he leads the charge out of... So in the books, he is the person who is left effectively in charge of looking after Meereen when Dany heads off over the Dothraki Sea on the back of Drogon. And they then come under siege from the Yunkai, the Yunkish, who are trying to retake the city effectively. And also we get Victarion arriving. So we get this battle in the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter. We get this battle described of what's going on. So he leads the charge out. I think that what will happen to him is that he is going to have to be the person who decides what happens, or is at the center of what happens in the aftermath of that battle. I think he probably will survive the battle, but we suddenly will find we've got Tyrion and we've got Jorah who are there. They're going to suddenly appear. We've got Victarion suddenly appearing. We've got Moqorro appearing, who got sent. He's this Red Priest who's been sent from Red Priest Central to help out Dany. We've also got coming across the sea Marwyn, the Maester, Marwyn the Mage, who is coming across as well. At some point he's going to arrive, so I think that we're going to have Barristan being at the center point of all of that before Dany finally returns. So he may well survive a bit longer in the books than he did on the show, but his time is as a central character is going to start to be coming to an end, because his importance was being the link back to Westeros for Dany, particularly the absence of Jorah. That was his role. He could tell her about what was what it was like back in Westeros. Now, with all these other characters appearing, there are other people who can do that. So I think his role is starting to end. I did spot that we had LML. Hi, LML, in the chat. Great to see you. And yes, a couple of people saying it would be good to have him back on. We definitely will. LML, you are welcome whenever you want. And hugs and kisses back to you. Fernzilla, thank you very much for your super chat, saying, ever thought how the Unsullied and Dothraki, two completely different armies, represent different sides of Daenerys? That's a really interesting thought. I think you're right that the Dothraki are very much the attack force. They are the conquering side of her. That's what they're about. She's all about the fire and burning and death and all the rest of it. So yes, that's there. The Unsullied are a lot more representative of strong defensive infantry more than anything else. That's their particular role. I think that is an element of Dany's character. I don't think that's the main element of her character. Certainly in the books, I think we'll see a lot more of the attacking side. I think, if anything, if we're looking at this imagery here of these two different sides, perhaps when she had the Unsullied in the books, in the last book, that was when she was attempting to dig in Meereen and to sort of stay there and rule and do all of these kinds of things. And what we're going to see, I am convinced, in the first few chapters of the Winds of Winter, the first few Dany chapters of the Winds of Winter, is her reclaiming her Targaryen side, which will indeed coincide with her taking control of the Dothraki. So yes, I think that there perhaps is an echo of that in I've talked my way around to it. So I think that's a really good point there for Zilla, that yes, they show this sort of dynamic that she has that she's trying to work through as to whether she should stay or whether she should go across, because she rejects a number of opportunities to head over to Westeros to try and stay and do what she thinks she should do in Meereen. So thank you for that one. T. Panava saying, what do you think will happen if Lady Stoneheart and Jon Snow meet? I would love it if she gives him the last kiss and thus redeeming herself for the way she treated him. What are your thoughts? I think that is a fantastic thought. I really hope that they do meet. I think that the character of Lady Stoneheart is one that clearly has a role in the books, and that role hasn't been shown yet. She's, as a character, she's appeared, and she is being this kind of vengeful Stark, so she's taken, or, well, Arya on the show has taken a little bit of that role, but there is something more for her, I think. And so the fact that she is there, I guess, implies that there is a role for her to do. But as it stands, she does not know what we know. The book characters, the show characters do not know what we know. So as far as she is concerned, whatever is left of Catelyn Stark within her still thinks that Jon Snow is this bastard child. So she is not now, as Lady Stoneheart, she is not in a kind of a loving, kind, forgiving way. She's in a vengeful way. So I think that would be quite a big leap for her to be giving this last kiss, if indeed she even knows how, because Beric at least had this thoughts and training, and he'd been seeing this happen so many times before, but she perhaps doesn't. So maybe not. I love the idea of her getting some redemption like that, but I think that her role is going to be a lot more being the vengeful Stark. Perhaps she will be the person who brings vengeance on House Frey rather than Arya, perhaps. But thank you. That was a really good question. Wassa30, just quickly, I saw there's a super chat which I'll come to in just 1 second, but this was a good question which caught my eye, saying, do you think that's Quaithe that keeps sending Dany the dragon dreams? Yes, it is her who keeps on sending her dreams about trying to remember who you are, is what she keeps on saying, and basically this is her. It comes back to what I was saying about a moment ago. This is her trying to get Dany to rediscover her Targaryenness and rediscover the conquering spirit, because Quaithe wants Dany to go over to Westeros and be a conquering Targaryen. So that's that is her sending these visions, these dreams to her. Brennan Barnes, one of my patrons, and thank you very much for the super chat, saying, what theories that you've seen elsewhere do you feel are the most likely? For me, it's Preston Jacobs' theory that Qyburn works for the Martells. I think I did see a video, that video about Qyburn working for the Martells. I think it was a long time ago. I can't remember being particularly won over by it, I have to say. That one hasn't really convinced me. In terms of other people's videos, I have to say I don't actually watch that many other people's videos, at least partly because, well, I haven't got enough time to be watching all the videos I might like to, but also because I want to come up with my own ideas, not just regurgitate what other people come up with. So I probably have watched a whole lot less videos than some of you guys have. But in terms of ones that I really like, just actually, while we're thinking about Preston, one set of videos that I think was the videos that sort of propelled him to the heights that he's at now, the Dornish master plan videos, which, if you've ever wondered what on earth the actual Dornish plot is, that apparently they've got this master strategist there in Doran Martell but they clearly cut it down to pretty much nothing on the show. If you ever wonder what they're actually trying to do go and check out those videos by Preston Jacobs. I think that they're really interesting. I don't think I agree with everything, but I think that it opens your eyes to actually the depth and subtlety of what's going on there. In terms of if there's any other theories that other people have come up with, I'm not sure. Nothing immediately springs to mind, I have to say. There are a lot that when I'm going through, I see bits from other people's ideas. I would personally say that if you're looking for the Game of Thrones community or the A Song of Ice and Fire community that has been thinking about these things for the longest, actually don't restrict yourself to looking at YouTube videos. There's a whole wealth of stuff out there on Reddit and places like that you can, Westeros.org, where there are people who've been churning over these thoughts for many, many years. So I would highly recommend you go and do that. And as LML is out there, I would also recommend that you go and check out his videos, because I think that what he says is not theories so much as a way of looking at things and trying to understand the extra layers that are in there, that I think actually he has won me over on about where magic comes from. I don't know if that was his intention, but for me, where magic comes from, and therefore what that means for the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. Brennan, I think you also, on my Patreon page, I'm just having a quick look, I think you asked a very similar question and added to it another bit. Which theory of mine am I most confident in? I think that for me, the thing that I'm most confident in, that is probably counts as a theory, I don't know, we haven't got 100% proof of it, is the fact that behind the scenes, particularly in the period of Robert's Rebellion, just before, just after, and with the Starks, with Jon and with Bran, Bloodraven and Howland Reed have been really operating behind the scenes, putting all the pieces in the right place. I'm going to do a video on this when I get to the end of my series on what I think happened right up to the Tower of Joy, and just after. I'm going to end, I think, with an epic length, at least, video on how I think Bloodraven and Howland Reed influenced that whole dynamic of what was going on there, and all the different places that things were just nudged and pushed and all the rest of it. And I think that there is so much that is pointing towards that, and the centrality of the Isle of Faces, that I think that for me, I'm convinced that that's the case, that they have been working behind the scenes. So that's something I personally think is almost beyond theory for me. I in my mind, that is canon. It may not be the truth of it, but that's where I'm at. Reese O says, I think Laura D's question was a good one. I will try and find that. Just having a quick flick through the questions. Oh, you got a super chat I just spotted. Ricardo Guira, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Do you think Oberyn poisoned Tywin? Now, this is a great question. This is something which they didn't really cover in the show, but it's very clear. Oberyn Martell has a backstory here. Oberyn Martell was very close to his sister, who was Elia Martell, and she was obviously brutally killed, and her children were brutally killed, effectively on the orders of Tywin Lannister. And Oberyn carried a huge grudge for a long time. He was held back from doing anything about that by Doran Martell, heading up the Martell family. But finally, when he got to King's Landing, as we saw on the show, we get to see him, and he seems all kind of sweetness and light, but then eventually you see underneath it all there's this steel that gets manifested in killing the Mountain. But also there is the hint that perhaps we know he wanted to kill Tywin, and there is the hint that not all was well with Tywin. Now, we know that Oberyn Martell used poisons and was a poison expert, and we know that there are several hints about Tywin that he wasn't actually that well. First of all, he was, for apparently quite a long time, on the toilet before Tyrion kills him, and the smell that comes from him after Tyrion shoots him is, I can't remember the exact words, but it's said to be quite overpoweringly horrible. And then his body, when you see that effectively lying in state later, the smell that's coming from that, and remember, they'll have had the best people in the land doing all of the spices and all the rest of it to make sure it doesn't smell. The smell of it is so horrible that Tommen has to, I think it's Tommen anyway, has to leave it because it was just too overpowering and has to go away. So there is a hint that there's something that was going wrong with him. I think, yes, I don't have any solid proof. I think we just have the hints in the story, but I think, yes, you're right. I think that Oberyn was poisoning Tywin. There we go. Okay, so Reese O. So I think the question here is, what do you think about the rising of the Dead Kings of the North, Lord of the Rings influence, possible or not? I think this comes back to the question that we are picking up almost at the beginning of this, which is about the Crypts of Winterfell. I think that this is going to happen in the books, not in the show, in the books. So I think that we get, every time people go down to the crypts, they feel like they're being watched by dead Starks. This is very clearly a Stark place. This is the Starks having to be buried there, and just incidentally, all Starks are buried there. It's a common fallacy. A lot of people think that it's just the Stark kings or the Lords of Winterfell that are buried there. No, they're the only ones who get the statues, but all Starks are buried there. So we have got thousands of years of every Stark being buried there, and a law effectively that says that the Starks have to stay in Winterfell. And that they all must be buried there. So everything is set up to have this army of Starks. I think that this would be an effective George R.R. Martin homage to Lord of the Rings. He's gone on record many times to say that how much he respects the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien and how highly he rates it. And I think that to have people coming, an army of the dead arriving, is yes, it would be a nod to the dead men of Dunharrow. I don't think it would be in any way aping it. I think that would be exactly George R. R. Martin's style. I think that he's left us all the clues to it. I think that if you watch that video, spoiling it for you if you haven't, but if you watch that video, I think that is the most logical purpose for the Horn of Winter, to raise the dead Starks. There's a huge chain of logic that I go through in order to get there, but I think that is its purpose, is to raise the dead Starks. So it's just a matter of we have to get it back up with Sam all the way from the Citadel back up to Winterfell, and hopefully when he's in the Citadel he'll work out what it's there for. So I hope that was the question that people were saying I should pick up on. Let me just flick through, make sure I've not missed any more super chats. I think I'm good. I'll pick up on another question from one of my Patreons. Actually, a second half of the question from Nick Oswald, which I thought was a really interesting one as well. Lady Stoneheart and the Lightning Lord, this is Beric Dondarrion, lost part of themselves being brought back to life. Might John be spared this payment if his soul is cohabiting with Ghost for a while? Now, this is really interesting because Beric says a number of times that every time he came back, every time he was brought back from the dead, he lost a bit of himself. And that was not just like a wound or something like that. He forgot about his past. Bits of his character went. It was like he lost some of his soul. And there's also, we see with Lady Stoneheart, she was dead for days before she was brought back. And when she comes back, there's very little of her previous personality there. There's just a core of it there. And I actually did a video on this. I can't remember what it was called, but it was something to do with the role. What is the nature of death in A Song of Ice and Fire? I think Qyburn, in a way, is the person who understands this the most. He is one of the. He's not a good character, clearly, but in terms of scientific knowledge, he's one of the most advanced. Now, I think what he said when he's talking to Jamie is quite important, because he talks about when this idea of if he's in a room, or there is a chair in a room, and he goes in and he can tell that somebody has been sat there. He can tell it was a woman because her scent was there. There's still the indentation on the chair. So something of her has lingered. And he says he thinks that is what happens to the human soul or spirit or the essence of a person after they die. But over time, it goes away. And that seems to be what happens, is that the longer you're gone from your body, then you sort of fade away. So the question that we're coming back to here is that if John, who dies, and we're all working on the assumption that he comes back again in the books, I think I'm certainly not alone in believing that John will probably survive that by warging into Ghost and then come back into his body, or be called back into his body. So the question is that process going to prevent him from losing this bit of his soul? And I think the answer is yes. There's a slight hesitation on the yes there, because it's also clear that if you warg into an animal after you die, then over time you get lost within the animal. So John, a bit of John will also still be dwindling and diminishing the longer he stays within Ghost, but I don't think it would be enough, the same as if he had just been brought back without going into Ghost. So that was a slightly complicated answer, but I think the answer is yes, sort of. So hopefully that makes sense. So had a couple of super chats here. Thank you so much, guys. It's really kind. Brennan Barnes saying, "What's with the one green glass candle?" Not entirely sure. I'm gonna pass on that one and have a think about that and come back to you on Patreon, if that's okay. I knew that there would be one. Whenever you put yourself out for Ask Me Anything, then there's always one question where your mind goes blank. So on that one, if it's okay with you, Brennan, I will come back to you. I'll have a proper think about that, because it's something I've not thought about. I will come back to you properly on Patreon on that one. Mazamonti says, "How sure are we that the children of the forest created the White Walkers? Could they be indigenous?" Well, I think on the show, I think we can be 100% sure that that's what happened, or at least they created the first White Walker. In the books, we know so much less about the others than we do on the show. But I am reasonably confident that they started in roughly the same way. They are described as not being undead. They are a different form of life. It's entirely possible that they did just start all the way up to in the north, but in any event, they appear to have been they appear to be the perfect weapons against humanity. So for example, if you were put yourself in the position of one of the children of the forest, you're fighting against the humans. You want something. Yeah, the humans are stronger than you. They use metal weapons that you don't use, which are terrible. They appear to be not hurt by the weapons that you use, and there are many of them. You children of the forest, you don't get many more of them, but humans keep on multiplying. What you are wanting is somebody who is, as a weapon, who is stronger than humans, somebody who is actually invulnerable to the metal weapons that they use, and somebody who can use humanity's numbers against them. And that is exactly what you get with the White Walkers, with the others. And you also, incidentally, you think, oh, we're creating a hugely important weapon here. Why don't we try and create some way of protecting ourselves against them in case they go rogue? Why don't we make sure that they are vulnerable to the thing that we use as our weapons? So they will be vulnerable to dragonglass. So I think everything points to in the books it being the same as on the show. We don't know, and perhaps we won't know until right at the end of, not even in the Winds of Winter, but in Dream of Spring. We might not find out till then, but I think it's likely. And I'm sure I did. Yes. So B1 Merry, $25. Thank you so much. That's very generous. Saying, when Bran starts training, when he comes back, he tells Leaf and Bloodraven that his father is alive. They tell him, no, he is dead. Then Leaf says directly to Bran, do not raise the dead. What do you think about this? Well, I think that the weirwoods rely on blood and death. That is how they get their nutrients. That's what's going on with them. And where I think they are wanting to get Bran to with his training, both of them, they are wanting to get him to a position when he's actually not being a Stark. He has to leave things be. So I think this is mostly figurative language. It's to say, let these things go. Just leave them be, because they will be aware, Bloodraven will be particularly aware, that Bran can, when he's within the Weirwood network, it's like time traveling. He will be able to go back and experience and live things at different times. So he could just go back and be at a time when his father was alive. So this is very much about Bloodraven not wanting Bran to go back to that. And I think there is also a bit here of what we saw very much on the show, when he's saying, you don't try and change the past, you don't try and muck with it, you just leave it well alone. I think that is a hangover from him being burned in the past when he tried to change things in the past. But I think that what they're trying to do here is to say, no, don't go back and try and change things. The things are as they should be. You just leave them. Don't try and change what has happened. Influence what is happening, but don't try and change what has happened. I hope that one that answered that one for you. I did see LML put a bit of wisdom about Jon and Ghost here, just saying, I think Jon's soul will actually merge with Ghost's, and so the spirit that goes back into Jon's body will be Jon and Ghost both. I think that's a really interesting point. I think that's the warging when you're your own body isn't there anymore, is very much a bonding, and the language that is used is very much that you get subsumed within it. So it's not that you just diminish and the wolf or whatever stays there. It's that you merge into the wolf and become together with it, and then slowly bits of you start to fade. So that is the kind of the imagery is there. So in terms of the spirit that going back into John's body will be John and Ghost, I think there will definitely be a bit of Ghost going in there too. I don't think necessarily it's going to be completely Ghost. I don't think we're suddenly going to see Ghost drop down because his spirit has now moved back into John's body, but there will definitely be more wolf-like tendencies within John after that has happened, if that makes sense. Okay, let's quickly trying to flick through. Okay, I'm going to have a quick go through a couple more questions from my patrons. Kathy Stark, hi Kathy, quite a detailed question, but we'll go with this one. This is a book question. It's saying, in A Feast for Crows, Sam and Gilly are discussing what to name Mance Rayder's son. And the conversation goes, Mance is not a name. You could call him Aemon, though. And Gilly thinks about it and says that Dalla brought him forth during battle as the swords sang all around her. That should be his name, Aemon Battleborn, or Aemon Steelsong. The boy was Mance Rayder's son and Craster's grandson, after all. He had none of Sam's craven blood. And then Sam says, yes, call him that. Should we interpret this literally, that Mance Rayder's son is Craster's grandson? This, for the backstory here, for those who don't know what's going on in the books, is that there was a baby swap going on. So we've got Mance's son, but Mance has got a baby child, as well as we've got what we like to call Monster, being Gilly's child, who is obviously Craster's child. And there was a concern that perhaps Melisandre might want to be killing some children for wanting to have the king's blood. So there was a baby swap that happened. So actually what they've done is that they've headed down south with Mance's baby, and they're discussing what to call this baby. Do I think it's very complicated, and I'm not going to get into all of the ins and outs of that, but the question is, do I think that that bit of text was hinting, or should be taken literally, that that child is not just Mance's child, but is also the grandchild of Craster? I think no, that is just a figurative thing, is to show that we've got a child who's being brought up effectively by the wrong set of parents. So Craster is Gilly's father, as well as being the father of her child. So that is Monster's grandfather, and they are treating it like Monster. So I think it's a figurative language rather than literal language, if that makes sense. We'll do another question from Beautiful Dirt, saying Cersei's POV chapters in the books are some of my favorites. At the end of A Dance with Dragons, which is where we've got up to in the books, she's pretending to be a reformed character. Her uncle is killed, and the Tyrells are extending their grip on power. With Kevin Lannister dead, a power vacuum is created. So the question is, how will Cersei get her way back into power? Will she have a trial by combat? And do you think she will avenge herself upon the Tyrells? Will it differ from the show? So the summary of that, I think, is what happened with Cersei going to on the show going to happen in the books? And I think the answer is broadly yes. I think that what we see happening in, I lose track of my seasons here, season 6 perhaps, is that we saw her going from what she thought was a position of safety, but then having bits broken down and broken down and broken down. So we get her losing control of Tommen, because we get Marjorie is starting to get in on Tommen, in with Tommen. We see her losing control over the people, because we get the High Sparrow. We get her losing control with her relationship with Jaime. We see everything that she thinks of as being her safety net is just being whittled away until she has to effectively press the nuclear button and destroy the Great Sept. So I think that character arc broadly is going to happen in the books as well. I think that she will think that she's in a strong position, but slowly but surely she will get pushed back into a corner. She is not a great strategist. When she's at her best is when she just acts on instinct and does stuff. And so I think this is what we'll see. What we'll see from the character. I think that there's a good chance that yes, she will blow up the Great Sept. It probably won't be the exact same cast of characters who die. I think that the show used that as an opportunity to get rid of the Tyrells, because they were just having to trim the story down. Some of them will probably be there. I think Marjorie will probably die in some fashion like that. So yes, I think that Cersei's character arc is going to be broadly the same. Mazamonti, thank you very much for the super chat. What's all this about horny goats? I have to know. So this is, I'm going to assume that this is the lovely and talented LML in making some mischief in the chat. This comes from a live, I think it was originally a live stream that I did with him, possibly on this channel, possibly on someone else's channel. We were debating the concept of where is Rickon, and in the books, and Rickon is almost certainly on Skagos, which is this island off the coast of the north, and the rumors are that there are unicorns there, and there almost certainly aren't unicorns there. But we do see, through a rather convoluted set of eyes, effectively through the direwolves' eyes, that there are horny goats, big goats with a single horn that look perhaps a bit like unicorns. So that is what that is. And then I think I said something like horny goats, and it has stuck since. If it wasn't me, it was LML, but that's what the joke is. Horny goats. And so we are hoping, those of us who want Rickon to have a bigger role in this than he did on the show on his return, is for him to come charging back into Westeros, heading towards Winterfell, leading an army of horny goats. Won't happen, but I love the idea. So that one hopefully answers that for you. Got another super chat from Andreas Aas, saying, do you think Jon will bond with a dragon in the next season? If so, how? From a Norwegian Game of Thrones fan. So I'm assuming that NOK is Norwegian krona. But thank you, that's very kind. Yes, on the show, I think that Jon will. I think that he is going to be the third Dragon Rider. This is where I see this the Song of Ice and Fire, perhaps most graphically shown. We have on the show, we have the Ice being the Night King riding one dragon. We have Fire being Daenerys riding another dragon. And we have Ice and Fire merged being Jon, who both has a dragon and also is very Starkish with his direwolf. So I think he will. It's clearly the number of dragons that are there are limited now, but it will be, pardon me, Rhaegal, his the dragon named after his father, and I think that we will indeed see him bonding with a dragon. We saw the start of him. They kind of hinted at it in the last season when he reached out and stroked Drogon. I think that they will definitely build on that. So yes, in the short answer. And hi to Norway. It must be very late there in Norway, so thank you for staying up. Chris of Oldstones, one of my wonderful moderators, and thank you while I think about it to the moderators. You do a fantastic job. Question from Cherie M, saying, why must there always be a Stark at Winterfell? There was a period when Winterfell was Stark free. What are the repercussions of this? I did a video on this one called Why Must There Always Be a Stark at Winterfell? But I would tie this in now, since I wrote that, much more strongly with the concept that there must always be Starks at Winterfell. Firstly, on a very pragmatic reason, for a very pragmatic reason, this is actually good governance. If you allow the Stark brand to be gone somewhere else, then you're leaving Winterfell open, and that means that your hold over the north is going to be diluted. But in a more sort of magical, mystical way, I think that it is clear that there must always be Starks at Winterfell, because the Starks, when they die, must always be buried at Winterfell down in the crypts. So I think that is what is going on. I think that effectively Winterfell has been set up as the fail-safe if the wall does not work. This is where an army is being built in order to protect the lands of humanity from the others if they come past the wall. So that, I think, is why there must always be a Stark at Winterfell, because the Starks can't move. They're stuck there, so they can't go off and build themselves another burial ground somewhere else. They have to stay in Winterfell. So that's what I think is going on there. So, Girl Nettles, Robert. Cherie M has a good question about Starks and Winterfell. I just answered that one. See if we've got any other questions. Jason Weeks, Warden of the North, saying, I'm here now, so you can start. Thanks, Jason. That's very kind. And a hi to you, one of my patrons. My Welsh friend, whose name I never even attempted to pronounce, saying the stream was with Gemma, Secret of the Citadel. I remember it well. Actually, now I do remember it was. I remember Gemma being there too. So it may well actually be on her channel if you want to go and search for it. If Jon and Dany, this is Sean Cray, I think you'd pronounce that. If Jon and Dany push back the others, what do you think is in store for future generations? What's to stop the cycle from repeating? I think that it's not going to be just a big battle and a fight and a pushback thing. I think that is not how, in the books, this is going to end, at least. I think that it's... there is a reason why the others have come, and I think that you need to work out what the reason is, and then Jon needs to be the center point here, the great conciliator that can come up with some kind of solution. This is a story about balance, and balance will have to be restored. If the others go back, or are ended in some way, then I think we also need to lose the Targaryens and dragons, because I think that the balance has to be there between fire and ice. We can't have fire winning. If ice goes away, fire has to go away too. So I don't think that we're going to end up in a situation where there's a big battle and the fiery dragons win, and then we return back to Targaryen rule, a reign of terror. You must follow me, or my dragons will burn you. That's not where this is going to end up with. I think the dragons, the fire will recede and diminish in the same way that the ice will. This whole Mandolin 523, I think this whole breaking the cycle only makes way for a new one. It's all about balance, life then death, then life again, history repeats. Yes, I would agree with that. So 26 Art Girl, hi, saying, when Bran saw the children of the forest make the Night King, this is on the show, they said that they made the Night King to protect them from you. Could the you be Bran? It is, I think, referring to humanity, to protect them from humanity. I was saying a little bit earlier in the stream about this is the clear implication of what the show backstory there is that they created these perfect warriors that would be able to fight against humanity, because humanity was going to take over. They were going to push. They were burning down the weirwoods. They were gutting the forests. They were getting rid of the children of the forest. They had to do something. The children of the forest, the extent to which we can take the stories from the olden days literally, I think is up for debate, but they clearly tried to do some big things with the hammer of the waters, trying to prevent the onward spread of humanity. That didn't work, so they had to go and do something else, I think, and that something else was the creation of these perfect warriors. Okay, guys, I'm going to take a very quick pause there, as I do in the middle of all of my live streams, just to let you know a couple of things that are coming up for my patrons, for my subscribers. I think, well, first of all, two things. Patrons, thank you. I say this every single time. I've had quite a few new patrons over the last week or two, and thank you so much. It really does mean that I can carry on giving all of my attention to creating the videos that I have at the moment. You might have noticed that some of my theory videos have been getting longer. I've been trying to tackle more fundamental and bigger questions, and that's because I've been able to free up more of my time to be able to do that kind of thing. So thank you, patrons. It really does mean a lot to me, and it really means that I can do this. So thank you. Secondly, and if you're interested, incidentally, in becoming a patron, then do check out. There's a link down there in the description. It's if you want to just support the channel, or if you want to get access to some of the exclusive patron-only things that I do, like I've got my audio narrations from the pre-release chapters of The Winds of Winter, for example, there. So if you'd like that, please do check out the link. But the other thing I wanted to say was my second channel, The Well Told Tale, for those who have yet to check it out. It's something I'm really excited about. It's me reading books, what I consider to be the finest stories of science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction ever written. It's long form. Each episode is somewhere around 3/4 of an hour. I'm committed not to break them up in the middle with adverts, so it's long form, so you don't get distracted by that. And I'm working my way through the classics of the genre. The reason I wanted to mention it was that we've just this last week finished the first novel, which was The War of the Worlds. There was 9 parts to that. If you are waiting until I'd finished that before starting and going through it, so now is the time to go off and do that. Or if you're interested in what's coming up next will be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which is a fantastic story. It's quite often in Hollywood turned into a kind of a monster story. It's not just that. It is so much deeper, with questions about the nature of humanity and creation, and it's generally recognized as being the first modern science fiction novel. It's certainly the first great modern science fiction novel. It's a truly wonderful piece of literature, and I'm going to be starting the first episode of that. It's going to be next Wednesday, so I think that's something to look forward to. So hopefully one of the moderators will put a link to that in the chat for you, but there's also, I think, a link down in the description as well if you'd like to check that out. Okay, guys, I saw while I was doing that, had a couple of super chats come through. Let's have a pause. So, Higa Herga, which is a fantastic name, which I love saying. What's with the stag still in King's Landing? Bugs me. I think this is a show question. They changed the decor. This is when Cersei took over. They changed the decor in the main throne room in the Red Keep. So there are lions there, and it's very much, and she is being crowned as Cersei Lannister, first of her name. So she is there creating a new house. House Baratheon only officially was there for Robert Baratheon and then his children. She has taken it over as a completely new dynasty. So why are there stags still in King's Landing? I think this is simply that you can't change everything all at once. Yes, they can change a bit of the decor, but she is there ostensibly. Yes, she's created a new dynasty, but she is ostensibly there as well because of the fact that her husband was Robert Baratheon, who claims to be the rightful king, and in the absence of that king's apparent children, then she is stepping in. So there is still a link across to the Baratheon. It's quite a loose link, but there is a link there. And we got another super chat. Thank you so much from someone. I will find it in just one moment. Infamous 1503, $10. Thank you very much. What's the deal with certain characters hearing disembodied voices at important moments in the story? For example, Jon hears a voice speak when they find the Whites. Dany hears a voice say, "Take her to the Magi." That, I think, is something that I would like to investigate properly for a video at some point. So I'm not going to put a full explanation here because I honestly haven't done all of the thinking on that. I think that there are a number of instances of people hearing voices when it is clearly, in my view, it is clearly either Bran or Bloodraven trying to talk to them. So there's a good example of when right early on, when the Bran and co were coming back from having watched the death, the execution of the Night's Watchman, and they discover the direwolf with the direwolf pups. That happens because Jon hears something, or he hears his one because he hears something, and it's like a whistling in the wind, and it's like a voice. So that, I think, is Bloodraven guiding the events, and I think that again you hear voices quite a lot when people are near weirwoods. That, I think, often is Bran, who is speaking out to people. He often says Theon or something like that when he sees Theon, and then Theon looks up, he's heard a voice from somewhere. So there's a lot of these voices are, I think, Bloodraven or Bran intervening in what's going on. With Dany, the voices are a lot more likely to be Quaithe, because Quaithe is trying to guide her to where she wants her to be. So I think that is what is going on there. There is a really interesting parallel between the way that Quaithe is trying to guide Dany and Bloodraven is trying to guide John. So it's almost like they've chosen their champions and are trying to get them to the places they want to go to. So that's what I think is going on there. But there are other layers to this as well. There are people looking in on them. There are people like Marwyn who are looking in on them as well. So that's what I'm going on there. As I say, I think there is you're onto a really interesting subject, and it's something that when I finish my current set of videos, then I will definitely be looking at trying to dig into it in a bit more detail. Jason Weeks, hi, thank you for the super chat. Where is the red door and lemon tree? Will we see them? This is excellent, and I'm really glad you asked me this one. I am going to do a video on this. This is one. It's going to be towards the end of this series about what happens in the Robert's Rebellion and Tower of Joy and all the rest of it. So those who are unaware of this issue of the red door and the lemon tree, these are memories that Danny has. They might have been mentioned on the show, but it's really a book thing. These are memories, happy memories that Danny has from her past, from when she was growing up. And so there's been a bit of debate within the community about where this might be, because she remembers being brought up in Bravos before they moved around a bit and went to Pentos, where they ended up. But some people, and mentioned him a lot earlier in the stream, like Preston Jacobs, have said, you know what, lemon trees don't grow in Bravos. This is a well-known fact. So where is that? Is she completely misremembering her past? Has she been told the wrong things all this time? What's going on there? So the answer, I think, is that the red door and the lemon tree are in Bravos. This is me spoiling my video for a few weeks' time, so apologies for that, but I think that they are in Bravos. Maybe when I do a bit more research, I might change my mind, but at the moment, I think they are in Bravos. I think that if you look at where she was probably in the First Sea Lord's palace. And we are told that there are only trees in Bravos in the houses of the rich, and that is the richest place in the entirety of Bravos. And in fact, if you look at the maps in the World of Ice and Fire, which is kind of semi-canon, George R.R. Martin did tick through everything, then you can even see there's this huge garden there with trees in. So I think that is where it is. I think that it is not beyond the realms of possibility that there is a lemon tree in Bravos, in the effectively the huge back garden of the First Sea Lord. It's not that it's impossible to grow stuff there. It's just that they don't have the right water, but we know that water does get brought in, and we know that there aren't any trees out in the streets of Bravos. So my working assumption is that it is there, but it's telling us exactly where in Bravos she was being brought up. Brennan Barnes, what was your favorite scene? This is a super chat. Thank you so much. What was your favorite scene on the show? And why? My favorite scene on the show, it's a good one. I think I'm going to have to go with whether they count as being scenes or not, but the last couple of episodes of season 6, when you get to the Battle of the Bastards, I thought was beautiful TV. I thought it was so visceral. When they showed, there was this one sequence when you saw John in the middle of the combat and he's there, and you just saw what George R.R. Martin has been trying to put across in a lot of his writing about war, is that how horrible it is and how completely accidental it is whether somebody lives or dies. And you see John there, and he's fighting one person, he's about to be killed by someone else, but then a stray arrow gets that person, and it's just this whole flurry of just confusion and mud and blood and death, and it's really, really good filmmaking. So I really enjoyed that. I thought that was excellent. And then in the final episode, I loved that beginning to it when you see Cersei and the build up to the Great Sept with that beautiful music going on in the background. I thought that was fantastic, and you could see all of the characters in there, and you worked out at the same time that they were working out what was happening, and that was wonderful. And you could see the inevitability of it just growing through that 10-minute build up. So those are my favorite two, certainly in recent series, my favorite two scenes from the show. Mazamonti, thank you so much. The daft idea to bring a white to Cersei, wouldn't it have been more prudent to show the small folk? Well, yes, it might have been, but I think it depends what the intention was. The intention that they were trying to put across was the fact that as it was, Cersei and Daenerys were fighting each other. Their armies were attacking each other, and Daenerys knew that if she went north, then all that Cersei would do was immediately come and attack her from behind. And so what they were trying to do was get some kind of alliance to try and make sure that Cersei wouldn't ruin it all. So that was the logic that was there. Yes, showing this to the small folk, I think that there's certainly a case for persuading the people in the north that there's something happening. Those perhaps in King's Landing, maybe it's a little bit too early to panic them with that one. But the logic by bringing that down on the show was to try and convince Cersei so that they could end the war or have a pause in the war at least, and focus in on what they should focus in on. There was another Kathy Stark, Laura D's question. I think, Kathy, thank you so much for the super chat. If this is picking up on something that somebody else has done and bring it to my attention, I love it when people do that with super chats, because I know not everyone can do super chats, and they come up in color here, and so I see all of the super chats, whereas I can quite easily miss other stuff. So thank you if you are picking up on somebody else's and bring it to my attention. That's very generous. The Night King can't be destroyed by dragonglass since he was made from it. How will he be destroyed? Maybe the weirwood trees need to be burned. Oh, that's a really good one. I think show logic, and you can interpret that as you wish with show logic, whether you think the show is very logical. But if the White Walker or the Night King was created by having dragonglass put into him, then perhaps having it taken out is the way to end it, rather than destroying him. I do wonder whether there's an ultimate weapon. We've seen that White Walkers seem to be able to be killed with Valyrian steel. Maybe the Night King, a fiery Valyrian steel sword, because the fiery swords can kill the whites. Maybe the Night King, combine the two of them, and then we can have the imagery of Azor Ahai reborn with a fiery sword leading the fight. So perhaps that's it. But whether the weirwood trees need to be burned, I think this is a fascinating question, because I think when I was talking earlier about the balance, at the moment what we've got in the middle is that's still the weirwood network, and whether or not they need to still be there is a different matter. I do not know. I don't think that burning the weirwood trees would kill the Night King. I don't think that they've made that link in the show at all. But the question for me about whether the Weirwoods should survive beyond all of this, I think that's a very different question. So I hope I answered that one. Let's, while I still remember, keep the questions coming in the chat, guys. I've got a couple more questions I had from my patrons that I want to quickly pick up on. Brian Price says or asks, as the White Walkers move south in the show, do you think the whole cities and kingdoms will be massacred? Do I think whole cities and kingdoms will be massacred in their wake? Will there be mass evacuation? Will the White Walkers possibly spare many as they march towards their goal? I think that on the show, we're very much looking at an army that is moving slowly because it thinks it can't be defeated. And I think that what their battle tactics have been to kill everybody north of the wall before advancing south. And I think that that is the only logic that I can really come up with for the movements that they did all the way across to Hardhome, which is a very odd place to go to. They could have left Hardhome alone, but they wanted to expand the army. The tactics of the Army of the Dead seem to be that you kill humans because that adds to your army, and it's logical. So it makes sense to me that they will just sweep across the north. They will try not to leave anybody behind them. They will go across to Castle Black, then they'll come to the last hearth and work their way across through the north, picking off cities and castles and fortresses on their way, trying not to leave anyone behind. So I think that's what's going to be happening. Will there be mass evacuations? Yes, although it's probably worth pointing out that there already have been mass evacuations. Winter has hit, and in the north, everybody has got their own plan for what happens when winter hits. Everyone within many, many miles of Winterfell has come into Wintertown, which is the settlement outside Winterfell, which for most of the year is largely empty, but everybody from a huge area comes into that when it's winter. In other parts of the north, they have other things that they do, mostly sort of coming into the castles rather than spending time out in the fields. So all of the farmers and people will have already been evacuated away from their small places and into where it's slightly more defendable. Beautiful Dirt saying, come on, Robert, I spent 1k on a new clutch for my car and sent a super chat on Ned. If you have time, please. I will try, and if I've missed a super chat, I hate missing super chats. I will quickly flick back and try and find it. There it is. Got it. And sorry about your car, by the way, I should say. Where are Ned Stark's bones? This is a very good question. They are on their way north. They are probably somewhere in the neck, is my best guess. So they are heading up there. We've got Lady Dustin trying desperately to prevent them from getting into Winterfell, but we've got people who are trying desperately to get them up there in the end. So my feeling is, and actually I wonder whether this ties in with somebody asked the question about when Bran was saying my father is alive, and the Leaf was saying don't try and bring him back. If Ned Stark's bones are buried in Winterfell, and if my theory about the dead in Winterfell is correct, then yes, we would actually see Ned Stark come back from the dead. So that is certainly what's going on there. So on the show, I think Ned Stark's bones are in Winterfell. I think that's why they've built the statue there of him. But on the books, then they did slightly disappear. Ned took them off to Cat, and then Cat obviously got lost, and they ended up, last we heard, somewhere on their way north, I think in the neck. So that is where they are, and I think they will end up there in the end, and perhaps even with Mage Mormont might suddenly turn up with them. Just a random theory for you, but you've got to love the Mormonts. So hope that one answered that one for you, and I hope I haven't missed any more super chats. Linda Smith, this is an excellent question. Wondering about your thoughts on where the prophecy that Rhaegar found was originally stored or found. I was wondering if it was something Egg found in a book or scroll at Winterfell. Now, I think that he didn't just find a prophecy. I think he found lots of different things. So there are two key places here that I see. The first is that he was in long-term correspondence with Maester Aemon. We know that they were talking about prophecy and things like that because Maester Aemon knows what Rhaegar's thoughts were on prophecy. So Maester Aemon sent him books down to read, so he will have picked up and read stuff that was in the Castle Black library, and that has got stuff that we know, because Sam's been there and looked, isn't anywhere else. So that is the first place. The second is something that I came, well, I didn't come up with it. This is a theory which a few people have bandied around. I pulled it together and packaged it into my own thoughts, though. The Woods Witch, who appeared way back in the past of the Targaryen family, well, a couple of generations back anyway, before Rhaegar, and prophesied that the prince that was promised was going to come from the line of Rhaegar's parents. That Woods Witch went to Summerhall and re-emerged many years later. It's almost certain as the Ghost of High Heart. Now, the Ghost of High Heart talks about gorging on her sorrow at Summerhall after the tragedy that happened there. Her good friend Jenny of Oldstones, it would appear, died there, and lots of bad things went down at the tragedy at Summerhall. So she spent time there gorging on her grief. She is this great prophet. She is the one who came up with this prophecy about the prince that was promised, and we know that she is there. The other person that we know that goes to Summerhall was Rhaegar. Rhaegar, we got told it was his favorite place. He would go there again and again and again. He would go there on his own. He would go there with his harp. He would come back with incredibly sad songs. The most logical conclusion I can reach from that is that he met the Woods Witch, the Ghost of High Heart, at Harrenhal. And over time, she told him about the prophecies. He would believe her because she is the person who came up with this prophecy in the first place about where the prince that was promised was going to come from. So that is my theory about where Rhaegar got these prophecies from. It's in one of the videos I've done in my series on Rhaegar, Robert, Lyanna, and all that. So go and check that one out. That might be the "What Did Rhaegar Actually Believe" video if you want to check that out a little bit more. James Bird, thank you very much for the super chat. What do you think about the theory that Bran and the Night King will have a battle of minds, i.e. they battle inside the weirwood net? I think that is a really good theory. I think that they probably won't battle inside the weirwood net, but I think that they will be involved in a more magical battle. We saw a little bit of it. I think it's a sneak preview of it, effectively, at the very end of the season 7, when we saw Bran warging into the birds, flying over, doing a bit of reconnaissance, seeing where the Night King is, and the Night King looks up and effectively sees Bran. So I think we're going to see more of that happening. I don't think we're going to see them both in the weirwood network, but I think that the Night King is in my view, pretty clearly a Stark, or at the very least one of the first men originally, and has some sort of equivalent of the Starkish powers, the Green Seer powers. Whether he's a full Green Seer, I'm not entirely sure, but the powers that he has seem to be the sort of the inverse of those kind of powers. So yes, that makes Bran and the Night King opposites in a way, and they will come into some kind of conflict. I don't think it's going to be within the Weirwood network, because I don't think that the Night King will enter the Weirwood network. But yes, I agree, there will be some sort of conflict going on here. And James Bird saying, yes, clarifying that inside the Weirwood network was just a simple way of explaining. Yeah, absolutely. And Sonia Rangel, hi Sonia, one of my moderators, saying, all of you who are in Hurricane Central, please stay safe. I just echo that, of course. So I hope everyone's fine, and get little bits of news about it over here, but I hope that's all okay. Noel Horvath saying, do you think it's possible that the ghost of High Heart, Maggie the Frog, and Old Nan are sisters, kind of like the Morrigan? Don't think they're sisters. I think that these are different people. The ghost of High Heart is, I think, from the description that we have, I think is almost certainly of Children of the Forest blood. If not a full Child of the Forest, then certainly she comes from that. She's incredibly short. She's white with red eyes, which is a link across to Bloodraven, of course, and to Ghost, incidentally. But I think she is from the Children of the Forest in some way. Maggie the Frog is described slightly differently to that. I don't think. I think she's just more of a Miri Mazdur kind of prophet who has powers, sort of quite a hedge witch in a sense, but I don't think there's a link across there to Ghost of High Heart. And Old Nan, no, I think Old Nan is just a very old woman. I think we will probably see a little bit of her younger years in the Tales of Dunk and Egg, the next story there. But she plays the role of age-old wisdom rather than magical prophecy. So I think that's a distinct and different thing that's going on there. She is the person who tells the stories that actually are largely true, because these are the stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. The things that the North is supposed to remember, but actually hasn't. The Megan V saying, I've only heard hurricane pronounced that way in My Fair Lady. Thank you. That's how I say it. So obviously it's another one of those words that in America you pronounce differently, like taco, apparently I pronounced wrong. I've got a couple more questions I want to quickly go for. John St. Baptiste asked one of my patrons, who I saw in the chat earlier, but I think was driving, so can probably hear, but might not actually be there in the chat right now. Incidentally, John St. Baptiste has his own YouTube channel. Please do go check that out. He's really into music and makes some great connections between different kinds of music. So if you are into music, please do go and check out his channel. He asks, is the last giant really dead? And will the last Children of the Forest be dead? This is on the show. Yes, very much the case. I think that was the last of the giants. I think that they're not exactly easy to hide, and so I think that the wildlings would have known how many giants there are, unless they are frost giants all the way up in the frozen north. There might be some still there. So I think that was the last of the giants. The Children of the Forest, I think, may well also die out. They might already effectively be dead on the show, because I fear the show will not go to the Isle of Faces. in the books. I think there are some in the on the Isle of Faces, and I think those are probably going to end up being the last of the children. And I think that they probably will also die out. I think that we're going to see a sweeping away of all of the old, and it is time for the time of humanity to really rule and to grow up as a species, as it were. Let's Beautiful Dirt says, kind of a look at. Oh, John Baptiste is there. Hi, good to see you. Beautiful Dirt says, can I see 26 Art Girls question on the Night King and Euron? It's very interesting. I will quickly see whether I can find that. If I can't, then if somebody else could repost it, I will happily get to that. Nope, I can't spot it. Sorry, people. And now, Beautiful, thank you, has super chat to bump it, and I still can't find the question. I will have another very quick look for it, but okay. Here's the question. Apologies for that. Could the Night King be a failed attempt like Euron is? This, I'm assuming, is a link across to my video that I did just a few days ago, actually, about Euron and how Euron was almost certainly, the clues seem to be there, Euron was almost certainly contacted by Bloodraven as a child, and for whatever reason, I have my suspicions as to why, but whatever reason, he wasn't trained up in the way that Bran was. He passed the test, the dream test, of whether you can fly, whether you have magical powers. But it wasn't followed up, which meant that he was going around with this just sort of unchanneled magical ability that really, when it got released, then that created the potential for hugely bad things. So is the question, is the Night King like that? I think it's a really interesting question. I think no. I think that Euron is a special case, and in that he, pardon me, the how Bran's powers got unleashed was through the weirwood paste that he was fed. How Euron's powers got unleashed, I think, is because he started drinking Shade of the Evening, which is presented as being very similar, or perhaps a mirror of the weirwood paste. So I think he got his powers got unleashed through drinking that. Now, my view is that the Night King, certainly in show in show lore, I think we're not yet there in that place in the books, but I think the Night King was one of the first men who the Children of the Forest turned to create a new kind of life to fight against humanity. And I think that they either the failed experiment bit, or whatever you might want to think about it, a failed attempt, could come in the fact that the person that they used to do this, I think, clearly had some of the old magic in them. So their powers, if you look at the Night King's powers, then you will see that they are sort of like dead-like versions, or undead versions of the powers that someone like Bran has. So Bran can inhabit, warg into living creatures and people. The Night King can do that for dead creatures and people, and he can control them in the way that Bran can control birds or Hodor or whatever. Similarly, he clearly seems to be able to operate on the same kind of dream or vision plane as Bran, because they came into contact through that. So I think what you're seeing is a character who had the kind of the green seer abilities, who then got turned into another kind of life, the White Walkers, the others, and this meant that their powers kind of switched. So instead of having control over the life side of things, which is where the Children of the Forest magic and all the First Men magic is about, it got switched around, so it's about death and the control over death and dead things and the like. So that's what I think is going on. I think the open question is whether or not they knew what they were doing when, or the powers of that person when they're doing it. I think probably yes. So I think that this was a deliberate attempt. What they hadn't realized was that the others, the White Walkers, would stay alive for so long with a grievance for so long. So that's hopefully that one answers that question. Guys, what time? I think we're going to about 10 more minutes. So if you've got any more questions, then now is the time to drop them in. Having said I was wanting to focus in on answering as many questions as I have been charging through as many of these. I'm sure I have missed some questions out, so apologies if I have. If you drop them in now, I will try and answer. I'll do a quick fire answering questions for the last 10, maybe 15 minutes of this. But I will just answer a couple of quick questions that I had on Twitter beforehand. Andreas Simmons asked, who do you think is the white-haired woman in Bran's vision? This was the vision that he had in the books immediately after drinking the weirwood paste, going into the weirwood tree, seeing out through the Winterfell weirwood. He had a number of visions about things which were going back in time because the tree was getting smaller. And the last of these was of a white-haired woman and what looks to be a sacrifice being done in front of the weirwood tree. I don't think that was the Night Queen. I think that was probably just the First Men. We know that there were sacrifices in front of the weirwood trees at that time, or at least we think that there were. So I think we saw that. It's possible we saw a ceremony at the founding of Winterfell, but we just don't have enough information. I don't think there's anything in there to suggest that this was the Night Queen, because we don't get any of the description that we would get with the Night Queen. Justice BPRD also on Twitter says, how do you think the White Walkers would make it to Essos, if at all? Do you think they had a presence there during the long night? Yeah, I think they did. I think that they didn't cross over the narrow sea. I think that there's most likely a land bridge at the other side of Essos. The presence of the legends over in Essos and a lot of the defensive structures there do seem to suggest to me that the long night happened there too. So I don't think that it was walking across the narrow sea. I think that if anything, if they did get there, then it was down the other side of the planet, as it were. So that's all of the questions I had coming into this. Let's just see whether there are any more questions here. So Andy Burnett, which one? Okay, let's try and do these nice and quick. Which one person rules the Seven Kingdoms when the show ends? I think it won't just be one person. I think there will be a lot of people. Cherie M, will Arya lose an eye and have to put her blind training into action? Great question. I don't know, maybe, possibly. But my guess is no. Q&A from my Welsh friend. Iron Throne to survive, it must be like the UK, 4 kingdoms as in as one. Westeros must keep as one for peace. Yes, I think, well, I don't think the Iron Throne will survive. I think the Iron Throne will be destroyed. I think it will be destroyed by Dragonfire as it was forged by Dragonfire. So I think that will happen, and I think that the whole fight for the Iron Throne that so consumed the early part of this story is going to be shown for the sham it is. It shouldn't be just about fighting for power. I think it should be, we're going to end up with the cripples, bastards, and broken things at the end of it, trying to work out how to govern going forward. Sasak saying, really hope to see Jaqen again, as I really enjoy him, character and actor. Yeah, I really enjoyed him as a character. I thought it was fantastic. I don't personally see the plot requirement for him to return, but it would be good to see him. Who else have we got? Thanks again. Lots of love going on out here. Maybe Noel Horvath saying maybe breaking the arm of Dawn was to keep the others out of Essos. Yes, the story we're told is that's to keep the humans out of Westeros, but yes, it could indeed be the other way around. Beautiful Dirt says, on your next Q&A or via Patreon, could you answer Real Chunker's question regarding R&L? I will try and find that, and please do remind me of that if I can't find that. What else have we got? Disputed Lands is here. Hello, good to see you. You had a super chat from B1 Mary, that I've missed? I hate missing super chat. I did. B1 Mary says, what are your plans for season 8 when it starts up? Thank you for asking. So I will obviously be covering season 8 whenever it is. I will probably go something like what I did with Westworld season 2, which I don't know whether any of you were watching through that with me. What I tried to do there was I did a live stream about, it was on the Sunday beforehand. I did a sort of a pre-show live stream a few hours before the show. It was 10 o'clock my time, which I think it makes it 5 o'clock Eastern time. I really enjoyed that. I had on a couple of guests each time just to have a think about what was going to happen in the next episode, answer any questions and stuff like that. And then I tried to make a commitment that within 24 hours of the episode, I would do my episode breakdown video. So I will do that again. I will possibly have 2 live streams. I might even do a second live stream. I will definitely try and do the trailer breakdowns because I just enjoy them as much as anything else when we get a trailer for the next episode, just doing a quick breakdown of that. But the thing that I definitely want to do is try and listen to the questions that come up and do a video on whatever the big question is that people are asking. That's the thing I love doing, is just trying to analyze a particular question. So yeah, I'll do that. I think that you will find that I will at least, sorry, 1 second. I will at least be still doing my 4 videos a week that I've currently got into the habit of, or 3 videos on a live stream. So I may even up the output a little bit more. But yeah, it will be full coverage on this channel of season 8 when it happens. Jaqen Hagar says, if Jaqen returns for season 8, do you think he'll fight for the living or the dead? I think that that isn't the battle we've got. We've not got living against the dead. We've got an army of the dead against an army of the living and the dead. Beric isn't alive. Beric is effectively undead. Jon effectively is undead. We've clearly got Qyburn doing some weird things with the mountain and so on. The faceless men, my big thought on this, which I repeat lots, is that the faceless men's saying about all men must die is not just a cool catchphrase. This is their theological belief. They believe that all men must die. Every human being must die. That is what they are about. And they will view anyone or anything which is preventing people from dying as effectively heresy. So they will be on the side of trying to prevent that from happening. And that means that they will be against, not just taking one side against the other, they will be against Qyburn and what Qyburn's experiments are. They will be against the Red Priests bringing people back and creating fire whites, and they're going to be against the Army of the Dead. So they're going to be against a lot of different people. Do you think, Daniel Marston, good? Do you think, not just good to see you, do you think the place names hold a deeper meaning, e.g. Dawn sounds like Dawn, and Winterfell? Yes, absolutely. George R.R. Martin did a lot of good thinking about why all these different things are. The two examples you've got, I think, are good examples of when he's just trying to put thoughts in our mind, really, rather than anything else. I think that clearly there is Winterfell is the one that is the most interesting, because a lot of the place names have got they're very descriptive. King's Landing is where the king landed. High Garden is High Garden, and so on and so forth. Winterfell is this where winter fell in some way? Probably. Or is it just it's cold and wintry, and fell is just good old-fashioned word for some sort of hilly areas? It could be a little bit of both. Okay, I'm just going to quickly flick down. Guys, can you shout if I've missed any super chats? I'm just going to answer a couple more questions right at the end. Bump on the real chunker question he has reposted. Okay, well, let's get to that one, as people have been asking, saying, do you think it's possible that R plus L was actually a political union, a failed attempt by the couple to force the Starks to support Rhaegar's efforts to unseat his father? That is a really interesting question. I think the answer is no, because I don't think that Rhaegar was there looking for a political marriage. I think that he was looking to fulfill prophecy. In fact, guys, I think I'm going to make this one the last, unless there's any other super chats, then I'm going to make this the last question, so I'll give it a proper answer. I think that Lyanna was not the kind of person who liked being pushed into political marriages. So I think that that's not really where that was at. I think that Rhaegar's attempts to unseat his father, from what he says to Jaime when he comes back to King's Landing very briefly, he seems to think about paths not taken, things that he didn't do in efforts to unseat his father. He says it's not good to dwell on them. The implication there is that he was about to do something and then he didn't do it, rather than he did something which ripped the Seven Kingdoms apart, but it didn't work. If he had done that, even if he had done that for that reason, why on earth wouldn't he have said something? Why? This sounds like I'm ripping it apart. I don't mean to do that. I think it's a really interesting question. I'm just working it through in my brain. If you were going to form an alliance with the Starks, you would not go and talk to I think she was 14-year-old girl. You would go and talk to Rickard Stark, who is clearly trying to forge alliances with lots of people. So no, I don't think this was a political attempt there. I think that this was him following his prophetic leanings, and I think it was her being independent and doing what she wanted to do, not what her father had told her to do. So I hope that answers that question. Guys, I think I'm going to call that to an end now. Thank you so much. I had some fantastic questions there. Thank you if you did super. Oh, I always do this. I say I wind it up and then you give me another super chat. Thank you so much. This is amazing. Noel Horvath, do you think Aerys knew Jaime was his son? Oh, okay. So there's clearly an extra layer to this one. So the question is Jamie Aerys's son, and would Aerys know that? Now, we don't know that Jamie and or Cersei are children of the Mad King. My working assumption is that they actually are Tywin's children. Yes, the Mad King clearly found Joanna Lannister attractive. This is Jamie's mother, and he clearly did try and take advantage in some way. Whether he forced himself on her, we don't know, but there definitely was something going on there. The biggest thought I have on all this that does actually suggest that perhaps they might be secret Targaryens is actually the names. Jamie and Cersei aren't particularly Lannister-y names, so it's a bit of an odd couple of names to give them. But personally, no, Noel, I don't think that Jamie is a secret Targaryen. I think that we've got one big secret Targaryen in the story. I think in the books there's somebody who is pretending to be a Targaryen and isn't, and I think that's enough for now. I think the one who is more likely is Tyrion, if that makes sense. So thank you for the question. I don't think I would agree with that. Okay, guys, I will try again. Thank you. I was about to say thank you for the super chats, and thank you again for that last one there. That's incredibly generous. Guys, if you do want to support the channel, then please do check out the link to my Patreon page. That's how you can both support the channel and get access to some extra stuff that I've done. And if you are at all interested in the Well Told Tale, please go and check that out. Again, there's a link down there in the description. All of the first book is now up. The War of the Worlds is up, and next week we'll be starting our new one, which is Frankenstein, which I'm really looking forward to. Guys, thank you so much. See you again, same time next week. I will have a guest on, so we'll be returning to the normal pattern next time, where we'll pick a subject and we'll go through that subject. But guys, I've really enjoyed this. Apologies if I didn't get to your question, but thank you. There were some fantastic questions, and I answered as many as I possibly could. Take care, guys, and I shall see you again soon.